I remember as a child growing up that reading was a big part of my interests and of my life. I remember being in third grade and we had this 1,000,000 word challenge where every book you read, you would write a mini, like 3 sentence beginning, middle, and end book summary, and then you would calculate the amount of words that each book had. And for me, as a math guy, not only did I love doing this, but as a guy who loves games and challenges, I really love this. And so I read so many books. I got to calculate how many words were in each book, and I ended up hitting all these goals. So I read so many books. Now, at the time, it was mostly Harry Potter, and it was mostly just fun, different books. And as I got older, I kind of read a little bit about that. But then I got to high school, and I was like, man, I don't want to read unless I have to read, right? You have the honors English, the AP Lit classes, and you're getting these books that are just not what I was normally interested in reading. But fast forward towards the end of my high school career, and I remember this. My parents gave me a book, and it was How to Win Friends and Influence People. And they encouraged me to read that book as they knew I had huge ambitions for myself, and they always believed in instilling the values of treating people the right way. So I started reading that book, and some of the stuff was amazing and mind-blowing and eye-opening. And some of the stuff I was like, this is kind of boring. But that's like any high school person would view. But then I got another book, and I remember this my senior year of high school, and it was called Training Camp by John Gordon. And this book was a business fable. It combined sports with ambition, with the underdog mentality. And I was like, this is it. And so I took out a quote from that book. I hung it up on my wall. I read it every single day. And for the next 10 plus years, from the time I was in high school till through college, post-college, I had this thing hanging up on my wall. And I realized throughout all of this that I loved books. I loved reading. I thought the power of books were spectacular because my life was impacted so much. So much to the point that I envisioned one day I would write a book. But the only problem with this was I thought I had to wait till I had a successful career. I thought that I had to wait to make a lot of money. I thought that I had to wait to become famous. I thought that I had to wait to be somebody before I could write a book. And so my plan was to do this at 40, 50, or whatever that time came. I had never expected that I could do this at 23 years old. So I want to share with you a little bit about how writing my first book has led to a 9-year adventure and counting. All right, my name is Jake Kelfer. I'm a 4-time best-selling author before I turned 30, and I've used my books to build multiple businesses and help hundreds of people around the world take their own ideas and turn them into their books. Now, let me take you to the first book. The first book was not planned. As I just told you, I thought you had to wait to be someone. I thought you had to be a celebrity. I thought you had to be famous. I thought you had to be rich. I thought you had a certain amount of status in order for people to give a shit that you actually had a book. But as I was working for Los Angeles Lakers, I realized that that wasn't the case. I realized that if I could help somebody, why wouldn't I do it? Now, here's where I decided to actually write the book, and here's why I actually decided to write my first book. One of the big reasons that I decided to do this was because I originally set out to write blog posts because I was like, oh, anybody could write blog posts. This could be fun. It's easily digestible. But then I met with a mentor of mine. And that mentor of mine, he was a friend's dad who happened to have some books and did some speaking, and he was a professor. And he was like, hey, Jake, you know what? This content is actually really good. You should turn it into a book. And I was like, what are you talking about, right? I was like, what do you mean? And he's like, I would actually use this in my class. This material is what my students need. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's it. And so I ended up not doing any of the blog posts, and I went straight to writing the book. Now, on the flip side of this is not only did I get a little bit of encouragement there, but I've always had this personality of like, well, let's go big or let's go home. So I might as well shoot for the stars. So when I committed to writing a book, I was like, you know what? How cool would it be if at 23 years old, I had a book? What other 23-year-old has a book? Not many. And so in my mind, doing this was the way that I could stand out because I didn't know what could come from the book. I didn't have the knowledge I have now. I just thought it would be really cool to be 23 years old with a book. And if I had that book, I could use that book as part of my differentiation in the job interview process. Maybe I could negotiate a little higher of a salary with it when I started the job after the Lakers. And so I started writing this book. And as I'm writing the book, this go big or go home mentality came into play and said, well, if you're going to write the book, why not try to make it a best-selling book? And so then I started to do everything that I possibly could. And one thing led to the next. And I launched this book, Elevate Beyond, and it became a bestseller. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is crazy. But at the time, I thought that was what the cap was. Because again, I thought you had to be somebody to write books, be somebody to start speaking. But then someone said, hey, Jake, you can be a speaker. I said, what are you talking about? They go, you can make money with your book as a speaker. And I was like, I love to talk. This sounds amazing, right? And so then I started public speaking. And within just a few short months, I was getting paid several thousands of dollars to go deliver talks at college campuses, high school conferences, and even colleges started using my book as required reading in their course syllabus. I was like, this is amazing. This is spectacular. I'm getting paid to travel the country to teach people on how to make more money and get better jobs and have more fun in life. I mean, what 23-year-old wouldn't absolutely love this? So I was having the time of my life. And so that started this adventure. It started as, wouldn't it be cool if I had a book, to holy shit, the opportunities out there are endless. And sometimes in life, I've learned this too, you just don't know what you don't know. But the minute you learn something that could be of value, it's up to you, it's up to me to decide what are we going to do about it. And so for me, I was like, all right, well, let's see where this can go. So naturally, I write this first book and I still wanted to be in basketball. So now I'm balancing my time, writing book and speaking, and then trying to figure out how do I make my mark in basketball. Well, because I had a best-selling book, I wasn't going to go back and be an assistant. I didn't want to go to a sports agency and work in the mailroom. I had a best-selling book and I was getting paid thousands of dollars to speak. I wanted to do something that would be worth my time or generate the type of money that I believed I could make. And that's when I had another go big or go home idea that came through conversations with my mentor, the NBA changing the rules. And I was like, you know what? We're going to build an NBA draft combine. Oh my gosh. This thing changed my life. I had no idea what I was doing, but I went for it. And lo and behold, this thing ended up becoming a integral part of the NBA pre-draft process for a few years. We had people going through this. We ended up having 70 plus players go, NBA executives, top media outlets. We even brought in different tech to try and showcase different things. I mean, it was unbelievable. I got to meet some of my childhood heroes, guys I had watched play in the NBA all my life. I was now reaching out to them. I was getting invited to go to every college basketball practice in the country because of this event, because I was on recruiting trips. It was unbelievable. So I'd speak. I would then go to basketball practice. I would drop off books. I was always just on the go networking. It led to a 10-month tour, a year-long tour where I traveled the world called Elevate America, where I would speak, build the basketball event, speak, build the basketball event. And I kind of did that. And then I really wanted to level up my speaking. And this adventure is where it started to get more strategic, because after my first book, I had done really well with what I could do. And I was like, you know what? I really want to speak more. But in order to speak more, I need to have another book that's even a little more specific. I want to go more in depth into one of my number one requested topics. And so that's why I wrote Elevate Your Network, which was my second book. I thought it would be a great way to really increase my speaking, because that's where I was making and where I wanted to make most of my income as a 24, 25-year-old at the time. And when I wrote this book, not only did I get invited to a paid speaking trip in China before my book even launched, but I was able to turn that book into gigs over and over and over again. But the coolest thing about it, and the thing that blew my mind the most, was everyone said, oh, it's going to take you years to break in and get a gig because they already have hired speakers for the next few months. They need to see you in person before they're willing to hire you. And I was like, there's got to be a way to shortcut this. So I would give all of these decision makers for the statewide level, I'd give them all my books, and I would go and I'd pay to do a workshop at their national conference. So now they had my book, they got to see my personality, and by the time they were done reading my book, they had seen enough to know that, wow, we love this message, we liked meeting him, let's hire him. And so I was able to shortcut my way to getting booked on big statewide stages for different conferences in the high school and even the college market. And this was a huge advantage to me because at the time I was still busting, I was still hustling, I was still grinding to do whatever I could. And that was a really, really amazing thing because now I was speaking even more and I had the combine. And so we were really doing some really cool yin and yang type of things. Some days I'd spend my time with the basketball. That was more seasonal. And then the other times I'd be speaking at all different times, traveling all over the United States. And fast forward a little bit, I'm doing these things, fast forward a little bit, and then we have the pandemic. And the pandemic was one of these holy shit things for everybody. But for me, my revenue went from 100% to zero overnight pretty much, because all of my money came from a live event in the basketball, and it came from mostly speaking engagements and my books. Well, when COVID happened, I couldn't run my combine and I couldn't speak in person. So I had to start to think about different things and get creative. And that's why I wrote my third book, because I wanted to start really digging in and really making the transition from speaker and more traveling speaker and combine owner to digital creator, coach, and really start to find ways to monetize without having to be on the road, right? Because I knew something had to have shift. And so I started testing a few things, but I realized that the thing I needed to do was I needed to expand my network. I needed to solidify my audience being aware that I was making this shift. And then I needed to build something on the back end of this that I could generate money. So what I did was I wrote my third book, The Elevated Entrepreneur, and I did it in the form of an interview style book. Now, what was really amazing about this is, one, when you write a book and you tell people you're going to market it and talk about it, it's easy to get in touch with people. So this is how I got in touch with OGs in the space. Pat Flynn, John Gordon, John Lee Dumas. Okay, this is where I met Lori Harder, which led to me meeting Chris Harder, which led to him becoming a mentor. I mean, there's so many things here. But this is how I got to connect with so many amazing people in the online entrepreneur space, in the digital online space, and in the coaching space. So now I had a book that not only allowed me to build my network with some of these amazing people, but it also allowed me to borrow their credibility as I made this shift into this space. And if I was associated with all these big names, people then assumed that I was also in that realm. And that was really, really great. And it gave me a huge advantage so that I didn't have to spend a year or 2 years trying to change my brand from this to that. I could just jump straight in. And that was a really, really amazing thing of this adventure. And that's what led me to saying, okay, well, what have I already done? Well, I've built a successful speaking business. I had built a successful NBA draft combine. Now I could teach people over and over and over again how to build a basic 6-figure business pretty easily, because I had done multiple of those in just a few years. And so that's when I started my coaching business. On the back end of this book, I started the coaching business and we grew it to 6 figures in just a little while. And I was like, okay, this is really, really great. And I was able to use it. But as I was doing it, I knew that I wanted to get more niche. I knew that I wanted to get more niche and more niche because everybody was wanting to be a coach. And I was like, if I'm just a coach, I'm not able to differentiate myself enough. And that's when somebody that I had gotten to know, that I had invested in her as a mentor, she was like, Jake, hey, and this is how I remember it. And she was like, Jake, I would never bring you in to do a guest coaching spot to talk about what you currently talk about. Why? Because I coach coaches. But if you were to come in and talk about how you've written 3 books and use them to grow your business, I'd bring you in next week. And so that's what happened. I realized that. And so I was like, let me give this a try. This could be the niche angle that made me unique. And so I do that. I give the presentation. And at the end, people say, how do I work with you? How much is it? I was like, I don't know. I didn't have an offer for this yet. And so I said, look, I'll take you on. This is what I think it's worth, but this is what I want to do it. Let's test it out and see how it works. And that was when the idea of Big Idea to Bestseller was created. And what's really funny is people think that I spent a lot of time coming up with the name of this. And at the end of the day, it was no. I was just thinking about it. I was like, what am I doing? I'm taking you from Big Idea and we're going to bestseller. Boom, I like alliteration. Big Idea to Bestseller. That's what we're doing. And it stuck. And so fast forward, I got more specific. And that's when we decided to build Big Idea to Bestseller, which started off as me just coaching people on how to write books. And then I was like, you know what? I can't be the guy that teaches people how to write books if I don't have a book on that same topic. So that's when I decided to write the book, my 4th book, Big Idea to Bestseller. And I did a whole challenge on that to make it fun. I had to write, launch, and publish it before my 30th birthday in less than 90 days. And that was a whole adventure that I documented it. And that book came out, became another bestseller, and then that's when everything really started to take off. I had found my lane, I had become very specific, and over the last few years, we've been able to take Big Idea to Bestseller from just a general coaching business on books to now a 7-figure plus publishing company that helps people all over the world, hundreds of people, write, launch, publish, and market nonfiction books. And so this adventure that I've been on, I never would have predicted. If you told me when I graduated college that this would be the adventure I would have been on, I never would have. I thought you would have been crazy. But here we are. Okay, 9 years after my first book has been released at the time that we're recording this. I've written 4 books. I've traveled the world as a paid motivational speaker. I've helped hundreds of people in the coaching space, in the book space. We've helped 250 plus authors write their books, and the number continues to rise every single day. What an adventure. And I've learned that over this, none of this would have happened if I didn't take the chance to write a book. If I didn't take the chance to just see what a book could do. If I didn't have the thought, you know what? Wouldn't it be cool as a 23-year-old to have a book? Because my belief was you had to be somebody. You had to achieve something. Well, I had achieved nothing other than graduating and getting an assistant position with the Lakers. And I realized you don't have to be the best in the world to write a good book. You just got to be 1 to 2 steps ahead. You just got to be willing to go for it. Got to be willing to try to be different. And that's been my motto. And this one book that came out May 1st, 2016 has put my life on a trajectory that I could have never imagined. There's so much more that I get to do, that I want to do, and that I've yet to achieve. But you know what? I'm so proud of myself and my inner circle and the people that I've been able to work with, because this is what it's all about. Having fun in the pursuit of greatness. And I couldn't be more grateful for the last 9 years of adventure that I've been able to have since the release of my very first book. So I ask you, what's your adventure? What's your story? What are you waiting for?